Hi, Leslie, and hi, Tonya. You have joined us.
So tribal thinking can be problematic for us, I think. But conversely, individuality can be problematic for us. So we have almost a paradox in that we are in between this rugged individual and this tribalism groupthink. And how do we find our way out of that? Well, I think we find our way out of that through the grace of God. I think that's the key, is the grace of God. God's grace and mercy keeps us in the balance that we need to be in. And the way we achieve that balance is through our relationship with God. And that comes about through our spiritual practices, our prayer, our meditation, all of those sorts of things that keep us in a relationship with God. And in fact, that's the overarching theme of this chapter, is one of relationship. We are in relationships, and that's the important thing. We're in a relationship with God. And it talks about how Jesus manifested relationships with his followers. And not only relationships with his followers, but also relationships with people who were broken and in need of mercy, grace, and healing. Surely the people that Jesus reached out to, both as his followers and as those who sought his healing, were individuals who would not have been considered the most desirable people in their society. Samaritans, oh my God, the Jews and the Samaritans hated each other. And how many times does Jesus reach out to Samaritans? And how many times does he recognize the Samaritans in a positive fashion? That's about relationships. That's what that's about. And so, Rohr says, and I'm quoting him here, that there are these, we start with tribal thinking, we gradually move toward individuation through dialogue of election, failure, and grace. And I think this reflects on what we talked about in the falling upward text, is that there needs to be some sense of failure that takes place in order for us to grow through that. Then there's the breakthrough to unitive consciousness, and he says that very few are led or walk fully through those first two stages. We could describe them as simple consciousness, complex consciousness, and non-dual consciousness, or the unitive way. And one of the things that I think is particularly interesting is he says the last stage is utterly mysterious to people in the first stage, and still rather scary and threatening to people in the second stage. And if you are not trained in the trust of mystery and some degree of tolerance for ambiguity, frankly, you will not proceed very far on the spiritual journey. In fact, you will often run back to stage one when the going gets tough in stage two. And so we see that happening. We saw that process that he explains in our previous study of falling upward. But we can also see that happening with people who become rigorously legalistic as they proceed down their spiritual path, it gets scary. And so then they get into, and when I say they, I'm talking about myself included, us. We tend to want to revert back to the legalistic approach, the simple approach, because it's a scary journey, that process from simple consciousness to the non-dualistic consciousness. It's a scary journey. And sometimes it gets to the point where it's just much easier to live our lives inside the lines, inside the boxes, inside the rules and regulations and rituals, rather than expanding to an area that makes us feel uncomfortable. I have a question. It's a question that I pose to you. Rohr says we all fear and avoid intimacy, it seems. It is too powerful and demands that we also have faces, that is, self-confidence, identity, dignity, and a certain courage to accept our own unique face. So the question I have is, why do we fear intimacy? What is it that keeps us in a place where we fear being intimate with God, being intimate with our sisters and brothers? Why is that?
We don't want to be known.
Mm-hmm.
There are parts of us we don't want to have known.
That's
Makes
a
us
part of it.
feel vulnerable. Vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. There are parts of us we think are irredeemable, and we don't want people to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, dog, off.
It's terrible.
Sorry.
And in fact, that leads us to that whole concept of our false face, our persona, which keeps us from intimacy, because we want to look good, right? We want to look good, and we want to keep those secrets down deep inside of us. And what happens, I think, is that when we do that, we create this persona, and then we start believing that persona. We start believing this false face that we have created, and it takes us further and further away from intimacy with ourselves, which is essential in order to have intimacy with another and intimacy with God. I found a part that I thought was particularly interesting. First of all, he references a writer by the name of Gerald May. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Gerald May or his writings. And he wrote a book. What's interesting about Gerald May is he is not a theologian. He writes about the dark night of the soul. Gerald May is a psychiatrist, and he blends his understanding of psychology with this spiritual quest, this darkness of the soul, the darkness of the night. So if you have not had an exposure to Gerald May, I would greatly recommend taking a ride through Gerald May and seeing what that's about, because he adds a unique perspective, I think, to this whole concept of the dark night of the soul. On page 58,
John, can you hear me?
Not very well.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah,
I think there's a big time lag between us and you. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, we probably have to slow down a bit because a couple of times people have tried to respond to you, but it was as though you didn't hear us at all. So we'll
Yeah.
maybe wave when we're going to say something so that we can slow down, because otherwise it's not going to be a conversation. Can everybody hear me now?
I can hear you now, but I didn't hear anyone trying to say anything when John was speaking, and I can hear you better than I did when I first logged on. But I was having a hard time hearing you when you were speaking.
Well, there were 3 or 4 times it took to reach him, so I think there's some sort of lag. Is there?
I don't think,
Hearing me now?
I don't think it's a lag. I think you're too far from your microphone.
Okay, we're gonna pull the.
Okay, is that better?
That's better.
That's better, yes.
Okay, well then we get the picture better.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Yes,
Yes.
John, can you
Yes,
hear me
he
now?
said yes.
yes.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Leslie, can you hear me?
I can hear.
Anya
Yes.
and Gay. Okay, good. All right.
Okay.
We'll try to make.
Try to jump in there because I seem to have a little bit of a lag as I look at my my video. There's a little bit of a lag.
Yeah. I think so.
You have something to say?
Well, I'm going to try to
Why
go
not?
back and find what it was. I think we were talking about stages of understanding. And I think that scripture itself kind of shows stages of understanding from the early Hebrew to the later Christian. And I think the Greeks got in there with the idea of the individual, where the Hebrews were more into a communal or family awareness or group awareness. And gradually over time, then that became a special people. And then that became individuals who were aware. And then we have stories both in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament. You start with Moses. He tells God, "Show me your glory."
Mhm.
And God says, "I'll let my splendor pass in front of you, but you're not ready to see my face."
Mhm.
you're not ready to see me, and if you did see me, you would die. So God tells him, interestingly, I will take my hand away and you will see the back of me.
In Hebrew, it's the buttocks of me.
What?
In Hebrew, it's the buttocks. You will see my buttocks as I go by.
You see my butt. Oh, I love it, Leslie. You're wonderful. You will see my butt, but my face you cannot see. Oh, that is wonderful. Thank you. That makes my day. That absolutely makes my day. So we are not ready to see God face to face. And likewise, I think we often are not ready to see each other face to face. I think the church can be a place of openness and vulnerability, or it can be the ultimate in self-deception and other deception. I think it's a mirror of all of humanity, actually. And where we are in our ability to expose ourselves and to be in relationship. Father Richard says we could say, in relating to Trinity, the idea of the Trinity, which never appears in the Bible, was a later concept, but in the beginning is the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And the relationship is between two entities who are separate, but they mysteriously become more like one. I think when we say we are living in Christ, we are attempting to identify with Him and to see ourselves as a part of Christ, or Christ as a part of us. And of course, we have the imagery of marriage, which is two people who are become one. And that's the image of becoming one with one another, which we're lucky if we are able to do that at least sometimes. So it's that continuing process, I guess, of who am I and who am I in relation to, and in relation to God, whoever God is, how can I experience God? And whoever you are, or you are, how can I experience myself in relation to you, and you in relationship to me? And I think the whole mystery is.
You need to lean into your microphone.
Yeah, we're losing you. We're losing you.
I have to lean forward.
Yes,
Mhm.
you do. When you're speaking, you need to lean forward.
Okay, I lean forward.
That's better.
We're,
Oh, you muted it. Okay. Oh, oops.
Rebecca says talk into this ear.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
There
that's
you
great.
go.
That's great.
Right.
Amazing. I hear an echo, 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 echo.
Yeah, we'll also.
But at least we can hear you.
Okay. Back from it. What?
This is muted, yeah?
We're experimenting. Test 1, 2, 3.
That's clear.
That's good.
Okay, lay back.
You can hear it well?
Yes.
Oh, now the echoing is gone. Okay. Anyway, I said what I was setting out to say, and just that the bottom line is relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we don't experience that as God. On the other hand, if we are fortunate to experience God, it's probably not going to be by ourselves. It's probably going to be in relationship somewhere. Is that better?
Mm-hmm.
You sound like God.
Except now we don't have your video, we don't see it.
Face.
What day?
Except we can hear you now, but we can't see you. Your video is off.
Oh, the video is gone now. There we are.
Okay.
All right. One of the things I think is an integral part of this concept of relationship with God, relationship with others, is a component that I think we often miss, which is having a relationship with ourselves. I think that we sometimes don't embrace ourselves in a way that is positive and is necessary for us to function, to fully function. I think that there's this continuum of relationship with ourselves, relationship with others, relationship with God. And I think that maybe oftentimes we are frustrated with relationships with others and relationship with God, and we have not embraced the relationship with ourselves. I think that's a key component.
You speak through
What's
that.
a relationship with yourself? What does that mean?
You have to list to use that as
A relationship with yourself, in my way of thinking, is that you embrace all that you are, warts and all, and that you're true to yourself, that you're not living up to a persona or a false front, that the relationship that you have with yourself is honest and forthright. And if, when you have that sort of respect for yourself, and I think that's one of the keys, is having a respect for yourself. That's how that relationship develops. I so often hear people speak poorly of themselves. And when they speak poorly of themselves, it's indicative of not embracing oneself with all of your warts. That's not to say that you're without fault. It's to embrace the fact that you have your faults, that you have your warts. And that's what I consider to be having a relationship with yourself.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that I found interesting in this chapter, Father Richard says that people are first defined in families, and many are called to marriage because that sets the stage, gives us some grounding for relationship in general. Relationships seem so crucial to the whole plan that God had to risk giving us even sexual passion for one another and all the problems that might bring. That's because outside of relationship, we simply do not know who we are or what we are created for. When I read that passage, which jumped to mind immediately for me was the profile of a loner, people that aren't in relationships, and invariably those seem to be the people that strike out with violence, seem to strike out.
What now? Say that again.
People who are loners, who are not in a relationship, who are not in relationship to others, have a difficulty with empathy. And if we look
Difficulty
to
with what?
empathy,
Empathy? I don't know if I agree with that.
I
okay,
don't think I do either.
okay,
I think sometimes the person who's introverted is so overwhelmed with feelings. They feel so much that it's like the brain overloads. And the only way you can deal with the overload is to back off from people around you. And other people may not understand that. They may think you're being antisocial or you're doing something on purpose to look to be nasty or whatever. But there's a point where the introvert is so overloaded that the only way he or she can handle it is to shut down or back off. And I speak from personal experience. It's not lack of empathy. And most of the time, it's too much empathy. Too much feeling, too many feelings, too much awareness that you can't manage if being pushed or stressed or confronted heavily. Your natural response is to back off and run. To run like hell, if you will.
Well, the thing is that maybe if you, express that better in this way that the other side knows what really is going on, you don't have to use a lot of words instead of running to, like you said, running like hell to get out of this emotion or whatever. I think it's better the introvert, maybe you are or another person is, just saying that it's overwhelming and express it very clear that the other will understand. And I think it's nothing about empathy. I think empathy leans more for me to what I feel, what is going on in other men's life, not what I feel for myself. But the more I become understand empathy, the more I will understand also another person.
Well, that's true. The two are very closely related. You know, if you can feel your own feelings and be aware of how other people may be thinking and feeling the same thing or something different. You know, you can't have empathy if you have a lack of feelings at all. The psychopath is the individual who does not care about anybody, and he doesn't have much anxiety, and he doesn't really care what other people think, and he doesn't empathize with other people.
And that is what I was referring to. I wasn't referring to introverts per se, or those times in our lives when we have to take a step back. I was specifically referring to those individuals who are sociopathic or psychopathic, in the sense that they have a dearth of relationships, relational skills, and therefore a lack of empathy. And we see that played out time and time again with mass shooters, people of that nature. Those were the types of people that I was referring to.
Oh, okay.
Not
We thought you were referring to introverts as not having empathy.
No, I was referring to the
Psychopaths.
The psychopath, the loner, the lone wolf that has, that can go into a supermarket or a church or whatever and do acts of violence, and they're not, they're amoral. They have no concept of what they're doing is necessarily wrong.
Yeah. Some loners are psychopathic.
Mm-hmm.
They prefer to be alone, but they are capable of using and misusing people.
Mm-hmm.
And some loners prefer to be alone because it's uncomfortable or whatever. They're not psychopathic. And some loners are what we call socially avoidant. It's just too scary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those are all steps along a continuum, perhaps. And I was specifically referring to those who have become completely disconnected from relationship.
Right.
And whether we call them sociopathic or psychopathic or just plain pathetic, those were the individuals that I was struck by, that they are incapable of seeing themselves, perhaps because of the lack of being in relationship, having no relationship.
I understood the whole loner description. I think of it as the FBI description of a loner. Mm-hmm. But we also see the problem with lack of relationship with seniors who suddenly become all alone, have no one, to interact with, and not even a caretaker. They're just sitting there alone, and they slowly die, mm-hmm. from lack of relationship. And relationship is, just having someone bring you meals and speak to you is a relationship.
Right. Exactly. And my mother was, she did Meals on Wheels for years, and she herself was a senior. And what happened, she found that, not only was she bringing meals to homebound individuals, but in doing that, she developed relationships that were beneficial to her also.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Well, I think we've gotten to the core of this chapter, if there's not a significant other, we're stuck with just by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if everything is defined in relationship to us, it's a place that is hard to have perspective on anything.
Indeed, one of the things that he says that without a significant other who is also the significant other, we are burdened with being our own center and circumference. And
Yeah.
he says that this is a quote that I highlighted, and I had a thought on it. He says, our center will change literally every few hours or even every few minutes with every new celebrity, reputation, image, name, TV show, magazine article, billboard, or love interest. And what I noted on that, the note I made on that, I said, in effect, that's where our society is now. And in fact, it's very much like a societal ADHD kind of reaction. We have this attention deficit disorder. And I have one question that I want to pose before we close. If everyone can hear me, I have this question. On page 66, he describes, Father Richard describes being in Calcutta and ministering with with Mother Teresa's sisters. Mm-hmm. And the sisters know that a level of acceptance and tolerance is very different than in the West. And they told me that Mother Teresa shared in this tolerance. And the question I have, I don't have a knowledge. I'm asking for my own edification. One of the things that was proffered when Mother Teresa was up for beatification was that she was actively trying to convert Hindus and Muslims to Catholicism. That was one of the things that came out. And I have no knowledge of that one way or the other, so I'm asking for a clarification, or if anyone knows if that is in fact true.
I don't think she did at all. They didn't even have aspirin, but what she would do is go from patient to patient, hold their hand and smile at them for 5 minutes, mm-hmm. and then go to the next patient, and that was her healing. But she never proselytized or evangelized, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. That's helpful to me for my own personal edification.
Yeah, she was much more respectful than that.
Yeah. Well, what you touched on there,
the best.
Yeah. What you touched on there, Ashley, is one final point, which I call not only me. Oh, go ahead.
John?
Yes.
Can you tell me who it was said that she did try to convert?
There were a number of people that came out of the woodwork. I don't have an individual, but there were groups from India that stated that. I remember reading that, and
not necessarily clergy, just Indian citizens.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, they probably had their own agenda then.
Yeah.
One of the things that he talks about that I want to I want to finish on, which Leslie, you talked about, is Mother Teresa's presence. And that's a very important part of this whole relationship thing, is that of presence. I call it the ministry of presence. Being present and attentive is an important aspect of relationship.
Just being there.
Just being there. Just being there. You don't have to have the right words. You don't have to have a magic potion. Just her presence is sufficient. And I think that's what, Leslie, you're saying that Mother Teresa provided. She provided that presence.
Well, Father Richard says a true Christian is invariably someone who has met a true Christian. So that's an interesting thought.
Yes, that's almost like an adage of the renewal movement, the Curcio movement. It's their saying is, make a friend, be a friend, and bring a friend to Jesus. And so that's a good place, I think, to be. All right, I think we're about done.
Okay. So next week, chapter 4.
Chapter 4. And can we end with a prayer?
Yeah. Lord, you are relationship. And our weakness in relationship begins in our not coming face to face, not being able to come face to face with you or one another. May we have learned, or may we begin to learn, where we have to open ourselves to your possibilities, the possibilities you give us in friendship, in love, and in sharing. So help us to think on these things as we go forward and bring us back together next time. Amen.
Amen. Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Sorry for all
Good
the
night.
interruptions.